He hit her before she finished her sentence. No warning, no excuse. Just a hard fist thrown by a man who thought the rules bent around him. And the sound wasn't dramatic like in the movies. It was heavy and dull, like dropping a melon on a garage floor. And that's how my mother, Laverne Cole, 76 years old, with a wicker basket on her bicycle, went down next to a table of dog-eared paperbacks at the Saturday Swap in Birchfield, Kentucky, while people froze like the air itself got stuck in their throats. She'd said, "Morning, Sheriff," that was it. She didn't tack on "sir." And believe me, in our county, that tiny missing word could yank a thread you didn't mean to pull, because Sheriff Colt Merritt liked to be fed respect like it was his breakfast. He swung, she fell eggs, broke in the dirt, and bled yellow into gravel. And if you're wondering whether folks stepped in, right then, I wish I could tell you they did. But fear is a smart animal. It learns where to hide. You know what I mean. I wasn't there. I was 7,000 miles away in a place that chews radio signals and spits sand at your teeth, and my comm buzzed with 3 short pulses. I've only felt twice in my life, a pattern for something that cuts through the noise. Civilian injury name, Laverne May Cole. Severity, critical origin, Harlan County Sheriff's Office. And I didn't shake. I didn't swear. I went still, the way a lake goes still, right before the ice decides it's done, pretending to be water. People in Birchfield know the courthouse clock is a minute fast. The peach ice cream at Betty's melts too quick on the sunny side, and Colt Merritt loves a lens he had rolled into that swap in his matte black Tahoe like the street was a runway and the town was lucky to be invited. Bourbon sweat from the night before leaking through his pressed shirt. And yeah, folks stepped out of his way because that's what years of small-town intimidation teaches you to do without thinking. But my mom was steadying her bike with 3 eggs, a heel of bread, and a bunch of collards tied with twine, moving at the speed of a woman who has earned every slow morning, and she wasn't sprinting for anybody. Keisha Rowe, 17, selling knockoff cases 2 tables down from Mrs. Troutman's Jams, had her phone up faster than her brain could tell her to put it away, and courage sometimes looks like a shaky thumb finding the red button while your stomach looks for a door. She caught the hit. She caught the way Colt grabbed her phone and stomped it. Then he turned and kicked her so hard the wind left her like a bad landlord changing locks. And even then she reached for that cracked screen, because sometimes truth only lives if somebody decides they're not letting go. 10 yards away, Deputy Hank Doyle leaned on a cruiser with the calm of a man who built a whole philosophy around, "I didn't do it," taking a drag, looking everywhere, but at the ground where my mother's head had kissed iron. And you don't need to throw a punch to be part of one. Silence can land hits just fine. At Birchfield General, Dr. Priya Shah took one look and skipped the polite talk. Subdural bleed, GCS of 3 white hair, matted dark breaths that came like a tired metronome. And the report from the sheriff's office showed up before the scan did, said elderly female fell while resisting, like words could mop blood off the tile. No mention of a fist, no steel-toed boots, no bourbon breath heavy enough to stain a room. And Priya read it, set it down, and told the air she didn't fall. And when dispatch said the sheriff had restricted transfers, she didn't yell. She told them to put her name on the record when she filed with the state board after a patient died because law enforcement tried to practice medicine. And maybe it's funny or maybe it's sad, but bullies tend to fold when you speak the language they respect. 10 minutes later, the ambulance had clearance to roll for Louisville neurosurgery, and by then I was already on a compass line home, leaving a checklist, a briefing, a mission we trained too long to abandon. Climbing into a quiet bird that doesn't show up on the right screens, flying a thin layer of cloud, like someone up there decided to spot me. A favor. And I didn't call the hospital, I didn't call the sheriff, and I sure didn't call Washington, because sometimes noise is just a way to feel busy while the thing that matters bleeds out. I put down in a soy field behind an abandoned barn, traded flight gear for a canvas jacket and busted work boots, and walked a fence line toward town while the sun thought about whether it was worth the trouble. I didn't blow through the front door of the hospital like an action hero. I slid in by the loading dock, nodded at a nurse who recognized the shape of a son holding himself together because she'd seen it. And I found room 204, and here's what a person remembers when they can't afford to look directly at the hurt. The vent hummed with a rattle on the 4th beat. The curtain clip was a paper clip, and Priya had a nick in her thumbnail like she'd ripped a glove too fast, and none of that changes anything, it just gives your mind something to hold. Besides the fact that your mother's hand is cool in yours, but still inside it there's that faint push that means stay. I said, "I'm here." I said, "I'm sorry I'm late." And the other sentences that wanted to bulldoze my chest stayed where I put them, and Priya looked at me like she knew the kind of quiet that keeps a man standing upright when everything in him wants to fold, and she did know it, because grief wears one jacket in these rooms, and it fits most sizes. Agent Mara Delgado came down the hall with a folder and the look of someone who's been waiting 3 years to set it on the right desk. She had a single instruction from a channel she didn't even have a name for: assist Daniel Cole, no restrictions, and that sentence tells you what you need to know about whether this was going to get buried like the rest. I told her what I needed: get Keisha safe, get that phone to someone who can pull ghosts out of glass, find out who else is holding proof they're not sure they want, and Mara nodded like she'd been starving, and somebody finally slid a plate over because she'd chased Colt across DAs and grand juries and lost paperwork that vanished right when it mattered, and she was ready to do this a different way. I didn't go to the courthouse. I went to the beige carpet building with motivational posters about teamwork and an IT budget that exists mostly in wishes because a small county's network is like a hunting cabin. You put a big lock on the front door and forget the back window sticks open. And in the Birchfield substation, there was a server closet with a padlock you could pick with a butter knife and a firewall. Somebody's nephew installed after watching a video in 2016, and I'm not some Hollywood hacker. I just know how people label things when they're hiding from folks who don't know how to look. And sure enough, there was an archive not on the backup schedule called Box 12 inside it, a folder called County Fair, inside that a folder called Taxes, like a little joke for the guilty, and tucked in there was Raw Cam with 14 files whose timestamps didn't smell right, cuts and mutes and renamed segments, the knife work of a liar trying to turn bad footage into bad storage. And I mirrored all of it to 3 encrypted vaults in places no county judge could reach without God's help. While I worked, Birchfield did what it does when it's scared. The Family Dollar clerk texted her sister the bar back at the Rusty Spur. A kid named Owen Pike sat on a milk crate in a mop closet with his jaw clenched and played back audio he'd recorded the night before of Colt laughing about how my mother's head sounded, and the men around him laughed too, because you'd be amazed how many people would rather laugh than be the only one who doesn't. And Owen stared at that floor and decided he wouldn't be one more piece of silence holding up a rotten ceiling. Mara tucked Keisha into a church basement with a lawyer who takes payment in thank you notes and casseroles, a grad student with a cracked windshield rolled up with a kit bought with grant money, and peeled 68% of the video off that shattered phone. No magic, no glam, just a frame where a fist moves like a decision, and a face twists, and a body drops, and a phone meets gravel, and ugly truth doesn't need polish, it just needs to be seen. Colt did his part too, standing on the courthouse steps in a pressed shirt, and that thick drawl he uses when he wants people to forget what he did with his hands, saying, "It's my sad duty." And that's a phrase you use when you're about to lay down something sour and you want it to smell like flowers to inform the community. An elderly female was injured while resisting lawful detainment, and then with that camera stare like it owes him something. He said the law applies to everyone, and it's funny how the men who preach that line the hardest almost never mean themselves. We didn't rush into some movie raid because revenge is loud and burns out quick, but reckoning, that's quiet work, ledger work. Names in the right boxes and locks turned with both hands. So we covered the witnesses first, backed up everything 5 ways, sealed Priya's notes with a chain of custody tight enough to make a drill sergeant cry, found 5 people whose complaints died on desks, a black father yanked for a tail light and introduced to a mag light, a white cashier who asked for a warrant and got a broken jaw, a Latina nursing assistant who learned how concrete tastes because she questioned a hand on her hip, and none of them wanted a spotlight, they wanted room to breathe. Now here's your twist, and it didn't come with sirens, it came with a docket number, because we filed federal and moved venue to Lexington under Judge Naomi Reyes. A woman who doesn't care who hugs her at parades, she cares what the paper says. And in that courtroom, the temperature felt lower than 3 a.m. on a flight line, because truth gets cold when you lay it out on a table and strip the noise off it. They called Keisha, first borrowed cardigan shoes, a little too big, voice steady in that way you hear when someone is more tired than scared. And she told what she saw, not the Instagram version but the kitchen table one, and the video played glitched and pixel broken but unmistakable, and you could feel the oxygen change hands. Then Owen's bar audio filled the room with Colt's laugh and the kind of sentence that makes your mouth taste like metal. And don't underestimate laughter in a courtroom. It's confession in another dialect. A county tech with hands shaking walked through file names and timestamps and didn't look at anyone when he said who told him to do it. and the room exhaled a breath it had been holding for years. Then Mara stacked 47 blocked reports in front of Judge Reyes. No drama, just layers. People think a gavel is power, but paper stacked right is a different sort of gravity. Colt finally popped like men like him do when the world won't bend on command, slammed a palm on the defense table and barked, "I am the law in Birchfield," and nobody gasped. Judge Reyes leaned forward and said, calm as a porch light left on at dusk, "No, the law is here, and it doesn't belong to you." And that was the crack you could feel in your bones, not loud but permanent. The verdict came like a winter front quiet and